The Lift & Co. Cannabis Expo returns to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre, November 18th to the 21st. Discover and learn about all things cannabis. Get your tickets at liftexpo.ca. Must be 19 plus to enter and attend.
Meaning, some kind of concurrent medical condition, and then they get COVID, and that's like the last straw in the coffin. Cannabis can come in and kind of get between your kind of ongoing medical conditions and this virus that causes hellacious kind of inflammatory issues. And cannabis comes in and just shuts down that cytokine storm and therefore blocks that whole pathophysiologic process. So
welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, the show that inspires, promotes, and gives you a daily dose of inspiration from the people who have used cannabis to change their lives in extraordinary ways. Here's your host, Justin Benton.
Welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, where we discuss this miracle plant with so many names and how it helps people in so many extraordinary ways. Today we're having back one of our favorite guests on an interview that we had, and Dr. William-Courtney will be discussing cannabis, hemp, raw cannabis, and how it helps prevent, how it can help prevent COVID, and how it can help you recover. We're also going to have some people on stage that have actually experienced COVID and talk about their symptoms and talk about how raw cannabis helped them and their recovery. So, with no further ado, we've got Dan and Janet and LaTara and some others here on Clubhouse too that I look forward to hearing some insights and sharing what we know about this virus and what we know about cannabis and raw cannabis and how it can help us with this virus and any virus out there. So, with no further ado, Dan, let's listen to Dr. William-Courtney.
Dr. William-Courtney, back from the Caribbean. How we doing, Dr. Courtney?
we are doing fantastic.
Last time we talked about some exciting revelations about COVID, and I know there's been some great research going on. It seems to be in other countries than ours, which I know you're in. But yeah, I'd love for you to give you the stage to share your research and findings and what conclusions you've come to about COVID and how cannabis can help.
Yeah, and when you move into the COVID arena, you're looking at, can you prevent the attachment of the virus? And it appears that the angiotensin converting enzyme ACE2 is a site where the COVID virus attaches, and then there's a process by which it enters into the cell. Both of those steps can be blocked, and that's where prevention really occurs. If you can prevent the binding and entry, then you're in good shape. And then in addition, it's huge as an anti-inflammatory. I mean, there are patents on cannabinoids as anti-inflammatories, and those are worth looking up and reading. But if you just go in and put in COVID and cannabis, it's stunning in its ability to be useful. And so if you can prevent it, then you don't really need it as an anti-inflammatory. If you've got it and you're coming late to this information, it's like, I'm struggling with it now and then I'm hearing this, or a friend of mine just got it and they're having issues. You move into this stunning anti-inflammatory response. And when it first attaches, there's these acute reactions that occur. And when you can block those excitotoxic cytokine storms, you can really just shut down a lot of the symptomatology of the condition. So the key thing is cannabis is strongly anti-inflammatory, and in COVID, the cytokine storm is just an acute inflammatory response, and it's found in a lot of the adult respiratory distress syndromes. SARS, ADRS from SARS-1. For the last 10 or 15 years, there's been a lot of research in these. And with these viruses, and what cannabis is so good at is quelling that cytokine storm, because it's a cytokine storm that causes the inflammation and swelling and fluid collection in the lungs. And for people that have, maybe they've had diabetes or heart disease, or they got comorbidity, meaning, some kind of concurrent medical condition, and then they get COVID, and that's like the last straw in the coffin. Cannabis can come in and kind of get between your kind of ongoing medical conditions and this virus that causes hellacious kind of inflammatory issues, and cannabis comes in and just shuts down that cytokine storm and therefore blocks that whole pathophysiologic process. So, still prevention, when in an area of interest of mine is if you have access to fresh green material, you can Julienne cut it into very long, like say a 3-inch long strip that's only 1/8 of an inch wide. So it's like this little pieces of spaghetti or something. And you take that raw cannabis, and the reason you cut it in those very long strips is you can kind of wad it into a ball, and it'll stay snug together, won't fall apart in your mouth. Put a plug of raw cannabis between your jaw and your cheek. The saliva will soften it. The terpene, the bouquet, it's kind of pungent when you first put it in, and that is an issue that people have to kind of work with. And once you've done it a while, then you come to love it a lot. But the first time you go around, it's like, whoa, I could go out and eat pepper plants. I mean, this is kind of strange. But it settles down pretty quickly, and then when it settles down, you just squeeze your jaw muscle, and that squeezes that little ball of raw cannabis, and out come the terpenes and cannabinoids. And what's interesting is that the absorption that occurs in the mouth, it goes directly into the venous system. And so those terpenes and cannabinoids that are now in the venous system circulate through till they come back and get dumped back into, and they combine with all the other venous system, then goes into the heart and is circulated into the lung. But a large portion of the stuff that comes in from the intestine, 100% of what's absorbed from the intestine is filtered through the liver. And that's where these very important molecules can be degraded and metabolized, and they attach molecules that make them more water soluble, so they're excreted in urine. So when it's being absorbed in the intestine, a significant percentage of it is metabolized. But when it's absorbed directly in the venous system, only 10% of the blood in the venous system is shunted through the liver for filtering and cleaning. 90% of it just blows by the liver and goes back into the arterial system. So you have this very strong representation of a relatively small amount of ingested material when it's ingested in the oral cavity, the oral pharyngeal cavity. So a raw cannabis chew drizzles these molecules into the oral cavity where they can be absorbed through the mucosa of the mouth, and then go into the venous system, and then go into the arterial system and escape that heavy-handed metabolism that would occur if they had gone ahead and just, swallowed the raw cannabis straight away. I mean, swallowing raw cannabis, in particular, if you're doing juicing and you got high volumes, and then you've got the capacity to metabolize a large amount, but still a large amount will get in. But the thing about the oral cavity, a relatively small amount of cannabis is going to put a larger amount into circulation, therefore able to support cells of the brain, the immune system, wherever there's, if there's inflammatory things going on in the lung because of pneumonia or fluid collections associated with COVID, you get the materials to where they're needed. And if there is some, kind of disease process going on, there's often an alteration of permeability in the capillaries in that area. And so it allows important materials to be moved into the intracellular space to become active in fighting the infection. So all the benefits of the immune system can be used wisely to support terpenoid cannabinoids that are coming to you, whether they're coming from your mouth or from the intestine. But in terms of COVID, it's its ability to ideally prevent entry of the virus into the organism. That's the incredible preventative approach. But if you already have a problem, then it kicks in as a very strong anti-inflammatory and helps shut down that cytokine storm, which is the process whereby this condition can become seriously pathologic, leading to serious morbidity and extended hospital stays and fatality, and in some cases, particularly those who are already compromised because of other concurrent or pre-existing medical conditions.
Well, and I'm so glad we have that on record so people can get in there, and there was a lot of insights there that I had never heard before. So, again, just awesome to have you on the show, hearing all these great things. All I could think about when you were talking about chewing cannabis was like chewing tobacco in baseball, and I was a baseball player, so you can draw the lines there. And I just had the vision of some big league chew. I know you couldn't keep it raw, but I'm definitely going to go home this afternoon and pick out some cannabis and put a little pinch in between my teeth and gums. So that's awesome, and I love it.
Yeah, you don't need just the flower. I mean, just take some of that leaf home, dice it up, juice it up, blend it. This really keeps your mouth in a very robustly safe place. I mean, because it's going to protect you against all viruses. It's going to protect you from the common cold, all the other coronaviruses. I mean, there's 20, 30 of them now. It is what you should have in your mouth besides the tongue. I mean, they go together.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to listen to that one like 14 more times as well. So, I mean, and I do, for those that are just joining us, that was Dr. William Courtney, the world's leading expert on raw cannabis and juicing. In his words on the previous episode, he said if you're incorporating raw cannabis into your diet as a dietary essential, then you won't have to use cannabis as a medicine. And then you could hear us talking back and forth about literally chewing and eating raw cannabis, which is what we found when we were looking. We found his research, and it aligned with our holistic beliefs when we were looking for a solution for our severe neurological ailment with my son. So, wow. That was powerful stuff. And you can find that at the Miracle Plant Podcast, wherever you find your podcast. And I did throw a link up there on top. That's the website as well to learn more about guests and have access to the same products that we're talking about with raw cannabis. So my mom's here on the show, and she is one of the world's, if not the world's, leading researcher on raw cannabis and all kinds of ailments. So I'm sure she's got a little bit more than 2 pesos to weigh in on the subject. What's going on, Mom?
Yes, it's really funny hearing him say that. It's always nice to get corroboration of all your research besides just dry research journals. And so everything he was saying totally aligns with my research. And I don't know if a lot of you know, but when COVID first started, I did a in-depth research of all the published PubMed peer-reviewed research, and a lot of it was coming out of China at that time too. This was back in January, was it only 2 years ago, when it was just coming out and people were trying to make sense of what it was. And so the scientists were always posing questions like, how is it getting into the body? How is it harming the body? What is an ideal solution to it? And so they listed all these different things. And so symptoms and what a solution would be perfect. And they basically described CBDA in terms of the strong anti-inflammatory and the fact that the homeostasis or balance. And so we talk about that strong anti-inflammatory. So it's important to know one reason it's such a strong anti-inflammatory, besides the fact that the CBDA goes to every cell in our body, way beyond the endocannabinoid system, is it literally in its homeostasis or balances all of our systems, digestive, endocrine, and our immune system. And that balance in the immune system is a balance between inflammation and anti-inflammation or anti-inflammatory. So it literally very powerfully throughout our body balances the inflammatory levels. And so taking some herb that has a little bit of anti-inflammatory property, it's just nothing compared to a natural substance. One of the, like say, cannabis and hemp are the only substances our bodies have receptors in a system for. And then the CBDA that uses that system and all of our system. So it literally controls and balances the level of inflammation in the body. And so obviously it would be a key approach to dealing with COVID. And then as Dr. Courtney mentioned, you have what they call the cytokine storm. It just means that the immune system overreacted and sent way too many T cells and different things, macrophages, whatever, into the lungs, because that's often where the COVID first comes in and attaches to the ACE2 receptors. And pretty soon you have all these byproducts of it, including fluid. And then you get basically like pneumonia type symptoms. And you see all the people on the respirators and everything, especially if they've already had, like you mentioned, other pre-existing conditions. And so the fact that the CBDA can balance the immune system and therefore prevent that storm from happening. And the other side of that too that he didn't mention, and so the whole idea of balance, so it stops it from overreacting. But if your immune system is weak and underreacting, CBDA can actually trigger T cell production to start the immune system working. And so either side of the coin, the CBD is in there helping with not only the anti-inflammatory, but also the balancing of the immune system, and encouraging it to act in whatever way it needs to fight that particular problem. And again, too, just real briefly, very strong antioxidant. And so sometimes take our vitamin C or quercetin or whatever. But again, too, the CBDA balances the endocrine or hormonal system, which again is oxidation, which is, I call it rust sometimes. But basically, wears down our body, damage from free radicals. And then the antioxidant, which is one stopping that. So again, too, it's not just a little herb with some of it in it. It literally is balancing that whole system and balancing that level. And so those two properties are huge. And then, so the homeostasis, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. And then again, too, its ability, if there is damage, especially in any kind of neurons or neurological arenas, it can literally repair and regenerate them. And so I had actually written a paper, a very in-depth research paper about, again, like I said, the research on what COVID, how it got in the body, what symptoms it caused, what they were looking for a cure. And they literally described it as looking for something that would help with inflammation and help with the immune system without causing more problems. In other words, balancing it, not encouraging it to go too high or too low. And so it literally is like the perfect system, the perfect product to use with it. And again, too, we were not allowed to put that out into the public because it wasn't a pharmaceutical solution. And so it's been kind of frustrating to not get that out. And as Justin and I have mentioned many times, we have many older clients with even like with cancer and all kinds of issues who got COVID and had very light cases. And so again, too, it does show it's something that works almost like you said on that preventative level, or at least it remediates it, so you're not having the severe cases that death is what people are really afraid of, or being on a respirator for months, or the long-term COVID they talk about. And so I was very excited, too, to have him kind of repeat those same things that I found with the research. And the other thing that he brought up was his 90% versus 10% absorption. So he's talking about putting the cannabis, whatever form, like the raw hemp or whatever, in your tongue or in the side of your cheek, I guess, or maybe down the front like baseball players do between your lip and your teeth or wherever you put it. And then it goes directly through that mucosal system into the venal system, into the arterial system. In other words, the liver is not getting a chance to destroy it or remove most of it before you ever use it. And which goes right along with our use of sublinguals, where we have the same issue that goes on, where it goes directly into the sublingual gland, into the bloodstream without being processed by the liver first. And so again, too, you have a much higher percentage. The same thing we always talk about 90%. Or 10% we always talk about is all you get when you swallow it in any form, whether it's a gummy or you just swallow your sublingual oil immediately or put it in candy or whatever people do. And so it was really nice to see those numbers match up again, that when you keep it so it goes directly into the bloodstream where it's needed and doesn't get through that whole cycle of going through the liver. And the liver, we hear a lot about too. It also is where all the drug interactions take place. And so the majority of drug interactions are actually drug interactions. It's the chemicals and the makeup of the drugs or the pharmaceuticals that our body A doesn't recognize and doesn't really know how to deal with. So it's often those that are clashing. And especially so in the CBDA from your mouth, sublingually or with the chew or whatever, goes directly in and avoids that liver. Again, too, people are always concerned about drug interactions. And so I always say, well, very little of it even gets into the liver to even have a possibility of a drug interaction. So again, I just really applaud that. Obviously, he's a brilliant man and doctor and researcher, and it's always great to have people back up what our research has shown, and especially the topic today was COVID. And again, I'm kind of leery of even mentioning it because it's such a hot button for anybody that we mentioned there might be some other way to work with it besides pharmaceuticals. But no, and we see this every day. So again, too, very excited to hear this, and I love the way he gets down to explain how everything works to make it clear for people. So thank you. Excited to hear this and can't wait to hear more questions people have.
Of course, people might not know what CBDA is, who aren't in our world all the time. Just so people know, cannabidiol, when it's made by the plant, is in an acid form. So it's called CBDA for short. So when cannabis or hemp makes CBD or cannabidiol, it's actually called CBDA, and it's the raw form of CBD. And so what we were talking about with Dr. William Courtney, and if you're coming in late, you can now hear it again on a replay in Clubhouse, or you can go to the podcast and check it out for yourself where you find podcasts, The Miracle Plant. We're talking about using raw cannabis as a dietary essential, eating the plant. And if you don't have access to raw, fresh cannabis, which we teach people how to grow and give access to free seeds, then we also have some products that were made in a similar fashion to represent the whole plant in its raw form, which is obviously the simplest way to do that is to cold press it if you can't juice it. So that's what CBDA is. And we are proponents of the whole miracle plant working together like a New York symphony, and everything that was in there originally for millions of years, leaving it exactly the way it was intended, exactly the way Mother Nature grew it, exactly the way animals like us have been consuming it for tens of thousands of years. So I wanted to make sure everyone was clear on what CBDA meant. And I also wanted to talk about our experiences with COVID. We've had episodes on that in the past. If you go look back at our episodes on Miracle Plant, briefly, I'll share my experience with COVID. I got COVID this last go around, and I was taking some CBD. I usually take CBD on a daily basis, but I probably should take it more regularly. But I use it mostly just for stress and anxiety, and so that's usually around the afternoon or the evening. And so that's definitely when I'll take 30, 40, 50 milligrams of raw whole plant cannabis oil and put it under the tongue. And like we talked about here in the episode, with just throwing some in your mouth and putting it in between your tooth and gum, I'll do that too. But anyway, so I came down with it, and I was definitely tired the first couple days, and then I had a big headache, and then I was really tired for about 3 days, and I just slept a lot. I took lots and lots of cannabis oil, and to the tune of like 400 milligrams of sublingual oil every day, and drank lots and lots of water. Which was funny, when I got the diagnosis, the nurse doctor dude was like, he said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you that you tested positive," and he just said, "Drink lots of water." I was like, well, that's really good advice, actually. I mean, we should all drink lots of water, and our bodies want to heal. And so for about 3 days, I was pretty tired, had some pretty good headaches, but I just kept gobbling down that CBD. And by the fourth day, I was on my road to recovery, and by the fifth day, I was back at it. So that's been my experience. I am so blessed that I've had access to this plant, this miracle plant. And I didn't have, I think I lost taste for a day or two, but what flu don't you? And then what else? That was it. I mean, I was back to normal. I didn't get any of the lung stuff that some people get. Just a bad flu for me was my experience. But then again, I was supplementing my body, my endocannabinoid system, my immune system with cannabis for years, and a lot of extra while I went through it. So that was my experience. So we can people can draw on that how they want. And I know, LaTara, you had an experience so that you've been on a previous podcast. So we talked about this before. If you care to share it, go for it.
Yes, thanks, Justin. So I was tested positive for COVID back in October of 2020. I had no symptoms because, well, wait, yeah, I really wasn't sick at all. So I was really shocked that I was positive. But I was using the CBD every day anyway. So I just kept doing what I was doing. I was also taking vitamin C and zinc, and I took all natural things just to help me heal. And I completely healed from it. I did increase, I was taking CBD like twice a day. I was taking the Alleviate, the 800 milligram. So I just increased it and I started taking it 3 times a day. And just like yourself, my doctor advised me to, drink a lot of water. And then he added in, taking zinc and vitamin C and vitamin D3. So I did all those things and healed completely fine. I never had any respiratory problems, thank God. I didn't have to get admitted into the hospital or, get any type of breathing treatments or have any type of issues like that. So I believed in it. It worked. And to this day, I'm still COVID free. So I thank God for it. It's an absolute miracle. It truly is.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, I know we had a podcast on that with you and Connie and Amy and a few others. And it was really good for me and for others just to hear stories of what their experience was, just from the word of mouth of somebody. And obviously, we've all seen what this plant does with balancing our immune system, balancing inflammation, doing all those things that it was doing that Dr. William Courtney and my mom got into real specifics on. So, Dan, did you have any comments on that? I know we've talked about this a few times on a couple of shows, but what say you?
I wanted to talk just a minute about Dr. William Courtney before we get too far off that topic. He mentioned in a previous interview, in that interview that we didn't add this in that clip, but that he's going to be available to discuss, other ailments that people may have and talk about how to use cannabis or hemp in whatever form. I thought we should just drive that message home. If there's anybody out there that wants to, or that's maybe suffering, or maybe somebody in their family is suffering from something and would like to discuss that on air with Dr. William Courtney, he said he would make himself available. So I'm just going to throw that invitation out to everybody because it's a great opportunity, but B, it's great for our audience to actually have a discussion with somebody that's in the midst of dealing with some ailment.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was like a serious mic drop when we had the interview with Dr. William Courtney last week. And after we had the interview, he hung up and, because he thought the podcast was over, but, it was just me and Dan sitting there. And Dan was like, holy cow, did I just hear what I heard? He said he's going to help people, with all of his expertise and do a live podcast show about their particular diagnosis or their particular situation. So I do encourage, if you're interested, you can reach out. You can go to the website up there. There's an info@themiracleplant.org, or hit me up on Instagram or back channels here on Clubhouse. If you want to come on the show, we will schedule a show that you can have with Dr. William Courtney and talking about either an ailment you have or an ailment a loved one has, and hearing his insights. And of course, you can always do that with my mom. She's here on the stage as well at askjanet.org. She's done it on podcasts before and Clubhouse before, and does it every day or every week here by going to askjanet.org. So thanks for bringing that up, Dan.
One more thing is that if you don't have to give your name, if you just want to do it anonymously, that's fine too. So don't feel like you have to give a lot of personal information other than what you're suffering with, and because people may not be comfortable sharing that if they knew it was going to be about them. But we can make it private. We can just keep it anonymous.
Absolutely. And so we'll just reach out to me, and I will make sure we set up that little interview or podcast. And we do have some more from Dr. William Courtney. I'm not sure if we're just going to do another interview with him. He's a hard guy to get a hold of. Him and his family are living comfortably in the rainforests of the Caribbean, and you got to catch the right, earth tilt to get the cell service to work right. So when we grab them, we go deep down And our original conversation was meant to be about COVID. And then he actually kicked it off with cancer. That was last week's episode. And some of the information that he went through in specific detail about how cannabis can prevent and eliminate cancer cells, tumor cells, was so profound that we just cut that 10-minute clip out and put it on there. So those that need the hardcore evidence, they are the ones in the zero, the logical, the doctor, the researcher, everyone who you come up against who says there's not enough research. Well, all you got to do is point them to that episode. It was last week's Miracle Plant, wherever you find your podcasts, and tell them to push play. So that was a really exciting one that we had. So before we wrap up, did anyone have any final comments or questions? Anybody in the audience, if you have any questions here in Clubhouse, feel free to come on up. We are recording the podcast live here on Clubhouse. Any other final comments or questions before we wrap up the show?
I wanted to make a quick point, as always, just in the fact that I also had COVID Christmas Day. And again, too, just in generally being healthy, by the way, certainly helps. But also, again, too, had it Christmas Day. I was taking the 3200 every couple hours the first day, although I just felt kind of that flu feeling. And then the hardest part, and I was fine after that, basically, the hardest part was getting in to get tested again, to get my negative test or my golden ticket. So again, too, I can't emphasize enough. It just does enough things in the body that it really, really does help with issues. So you don't have to have all the pain and scariness of ending up in the hospital.
Yeah, absolutely. Just knowing that, logically you know it, and, in your own experiences and your friends and your loved ones who've had COVID and have used, strong, good, whole plant cannabis. I know when I got my positive test a few, months ago or whatever it was, I immediately knew that I could count on it. And count on it I did. And like I said, I had a real mild case myself. So once again, this miracle plant helping our bodies find that balance. So at the end of every podcast, we say heal the world, because that's our mission at the Miracle Plant, is to pay it forward, help educate, give people access to the seeds, the plants, the products, the things that actually work in the best form possible. So on the count of three, we say heal the world because we want to send out that energy, those vibes, that light to those that are looking for another solution, any solution, something that actually works, just like we were looking for a solution and so many others who have found us and found this miracle plant. So on the count of three, unmute your mics and let's say heal the world. 1, 2, 3.
Heal the
world!
Heal the world!
Heal the world, baby.
Thanks, everybody, for swinging by the Miracle Plan podcast. We'll see you next week on Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific on Clubhouse and wherever you find your podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.